I'm going to be sharing on integrating cultural wellness and recovery. So really this new, a new, maybe a new, but it's a new thought to an old idea, I say. So here's my grandmother in her standing to the sunrise. So I've been kind of in the field for about 16 years as a late act and in substance abuse counseling. And these new buzzwords kind of come around, you hear things like on mindfulness and, you hear self-talk. So that's what I see in a way here with my grandmother is her mindfulness moment or reflection time, and then her positive self-talk and her rising in the morning, sort of asserting herself. And she has cornmeal in her hand. So there's this purpose, as well as cohesion, as well as resilience, strength. So these are all what they call extra therapeutic factors. And that's part of what this whole presentation is. And some of these elements in therapy are not there in programs, as well as even, in you talk about the DSM-5. So these are, again, new thoughts to an old idea. So what we're shooting for tonight is creating awareness on our own healing and recovery tools, and from a cultural lens, a community-based lens, and then reconnect with the cultural value today as people. And then I would say capacity building, kind of like this little goat standing on top of this ram. So I'm not an expert. My disclosure, I just watch lots and lots of YouTube videos. I call it YouTube University. In case you're wondering a little bit about me, I have different, done different work in my journey. I am currently the cultural services provider for all of CYFD juvenile justice services, as well as providing cultural care for patients at United American Indian Involvement, which is an urban Indian health center in Los Angeles County, board director, working classroom, and then commission member for the City of Albuquerque's Commission on American Indian, Alaska Native Affairs. I'm also the CEO for the Center for Intercultural Care, and I'll share a little bit more about that. Other things that I've done, I would say I just kind of got my way around and sort of found opportunity and sort of ran with it. Of course, pictures sometimes speak. When I say cultural integration and wellness, it's really been my focus, as well as systems change. So first, I guess just defining, again, integrating cultural wellness and recovery. So understanding some of the really important fundamental steps. So what is a warrior? All of us here are, we call sacred earth person or earth sacred being. I see, for us, like a father, mother, grandmother, grandfather, daughter, son. So we are all learners as well, and then healers as well. So what it's not, when we talk about the word warrior, so really looking at it, here's a perspective. So what does twin warriors mean? So we call this na yeche. So if you hold your left hand, na yeche, that would be holding the arrowhead. So na yeche, and then your right hand would be hojoje. So be holding corn on your right hand. So in both of our hands. So what this means is, so again, with the arrowhead, fear, and then with the corn, love, sadness, and then happiness, anger, and then peace, laziness, movement, resentment. We call this the monster slayer. Resentment, and then appreciation. We call this the child born of water. So this is the twin warrior. So how they work together and how they endure together and how they sort of walk together. So it's looking at, we say, I am, I overcome, I endure. So the so understanding, again, this basic step, understanding the value. So our first sound of life is cry. We usually come in fearful and alone. And then we call it as a second sound of life. Usually joy and laughter, acceptance, we feel secure. So this is the basic warrior spirit concept. So embracing challenges. So you have these young children who were taken out of their homes, their beds, like the week right after school was out. And they thought they were going to be sleeping in all day. And their parents brought them to our program at 7:30 in the morning to go on these nature hikes called nature fitness. And they were just sitting like this, just mad, not wanting to be there. And if you look on the bottom picture, you know, this was like the sixth hike, and they were just so engaged. You can see this young man leading the group they all took roles and responsibilities. They found purpose, the cohesion, strength. So this is that extra therapeutic factor. So embracing the challenges. So again, the ability to recover quickly from difficulties and challenges and bouncing back. So going now, again, integrating cultural wellness and recovery. So just defining what wellness is. I like this definition. It's the active pursuit of activities, choices, and lifestyles that lead to a state of holistic health. The Global Wellness Institute. So it's that pursuit, sort of being active. So really it's about those choices. I know we all sort of find ourselves in different places in our lives, but also the opportunity to create the new change. And then, so as well, wellness is being proactive. So it's not a one and done. It's something that we do every day. It's something that we have to do consistently, and then being mindful and aware. And then as well, it's about the balance, but it's individualized, something that I have to do for myself and somebody can't do for me. So defining wellness is like, what is that? You know, it's an active pursuit of a lifestyle change. So different. So looking at this wellness wheel, there's so many different dimensions to ourselves. Again, individualized, like what works for you might not work for somebody else. What your priorities are might be another person's priorities. So wellness is basically just that whole living and growing. And then again, we mentioned not a one and done. So wellness, the wellness wheel, the dimensions, most of us are familiar with like mental, emotional, physical, maybe social, but we've all grown even as our community or even in our families. So other domains like financial, that's a new domain, even academic, career. So these are all new parts of ourselves, who we are. again, it's multidimensional. So traditional wellness tools and skills. So here's a picture when we say integrating cultural wellness in recovery. So there's a picture of our grandmother again walking after her sheep, or you have an elder at his cornfield and the elder chopping wood. So that basic movement, that basic purpose, again, that cohesion, those responsibilities, those roles. And then there's a picture of here, our original McDonald's, our fast food here. You had to chase it down, and it took endurance and strength. We're looking at traditional wellness. So you have our grandmother here, physical movement. So walking the land, running. So there's that physical, mental mindfulness and clarity, that attitude and happiness. And then as well as her connection to the land, that purpose and finding that. And then same with this, our elder here, our grandfather here at the cornfield. So that walking and calisthenics, as well as that mental attention and goals, emotional, that peace and appreciation, and then the spiritual, that grounding and therapy, being at the center of the world, being at the center of the cornfield. So how is this important for recovery or mental health, behavioral health, social health? These are very basic aspects. I would even say simplified, but sometimes it's you could say hit and miss. So the healing balance, I mentioned the Nayeja, the twin warrior. So that would be the challenges, the past, sort of creating resilience. I mentioned fear, anger, those resentments. And then Hajoja, mentioned the corn. So the opportunities, the future, that maintenance. And then wellness would be sort of right in the middle. So the past and future. So the present, sort of being proactive and open. So again, making those choices, sort of engaging ourselves, whatever your wellness focus is, maybe mental wellness, emotional wellness. So again, the past, adverse childhood experiences, traumas, grief, and then Hajoja would be the goals, wellness, our well-being and happiness. Wellness is very different than well-being. So wellness is sort of the lifestyle, sort of the steps that you take to focus on the different aspects of the wellness wheel. And then well-being is sort of that perception, sort of that happiness. So wellness, again, making those choices, practicing, being mindful, aware. So integrating cultural wellness into recovery. So you have the Bernalillo County Healing to Wellness Court, a drug court program, where they integrate cultural Native American specific therapy and treatment approaches, for their participants. And that includes equine assisted learning, horse medicine, food is medicine, nature fitness. So we, as a director, sort of integrating sort of these steps. And again, I'll share a little bit, about why this approach sort of fits in with creating new pathways in recovery. So here's my father, grandfather, great grandfather as well. Sort of that extra therapeutic factor, right? Living and growing. So inhibitory and excitatory responses. So all substances sort of have this brain sort of effect, sort of even on our spirit, sort of calming us down, soothing us, or giving us energy. So looking at this as an assertive approach, putting our values into motion again. So again, your needs, others' needs, and then sort of finding that balance in the middle. So we always talk about positive thinking, as well as emotional balance. So it's sort of finding that, what does that mean? So acceptance, maybe understanding part of our growth. Each one of us sort of has a different experience or our story. So what is, understanding or discovery? I often think that I learned this, that sometimes it's not about recovery, about what was there, but more about discovery, who I am. So let's explore these differences. You can think about this sort of in a sort of a in balance, I guess. So focusing on wellness. So a strawberry versus a strawberry flavored soda, are they the same? One is natural and the other one's synthetic, right? So the sun versus a fluorescent light bulb. Or the experience, will it be different watching the Super Bowl on high definition, like a 50, 65-inch TV, or sitting at the 50-yard line? So the experiences are going to be different. So when we talk about the brain creating new pathways, so what is the experience in recovery or discovery, and as well as wellness? So looking at this sort of comparison, so this is called the culture of wellness is what I'm integrating. So it's looking at activities. For example, I share with you our grandmother, our grandfather, the cornfield. So physical activities, working the land. Most of you probably do enjoy those moments, maybe yard work, gardening, maybe taking a walk, going outside. But really, I mentioned the inhibitory and the excitatory responses in the brain. So most of you are familiar, probably heard like a runner's high. So you get your blood going, you get your heart rate up. So the brain response, you have adrenaline, dopamine, sort of these natural chemicals, right? Not the synthetic, not the crush or the light bulb, but you have the strawberries and sort of the sun sort of all working. So working the land, reflection as a tool. So my grandmother, standing to the sunrise, our reflection time in the afternoon, evening, and at night. So basically being mindful, and that really has a way to kind of inhibit, sort of calm us down. So you get the release of the serotonin, you get endorphins, sort of soothing effect. And then laughter is medicine. Most of us here all like to laugh. Why do cows have bells? Anybody know why do cows have bells? Because their horns don't work.
Oh, funny.
Right. What do you call a cow with no legs? Ground beef. So you just release a healthy dose, a natural dose of dopamine. So our communities and families, this is that extra therapeutic factor. So creating medicine, laughter, and taking healthy risks and challenges. So what would this mean? Like, what's a healthy risk? I know from my daughter one time, it was taking a driver's test. She was terrified, like nervous that she was going to fail, but that was a healthy risk, right? Even though it was terrifying or traumatic even. So taking that healthy risk. I don't know, I might try to join yoga at some point, but I don't know how I look in like tights, really tight yoga pants. So that's a healthy risk. This is how I would feel and look in tights or yoga pants. But think about education. Think about those activities, again, it's releasing that adrenaline, releasing the chemicals in the brain. Again, mental behavioral activation, music, what gets you going, right? What calms you down, what sets the mood for you. And that's also another, again, sort of engaging the brain. And then being in the moment, sitting still, standing still, initiating mindfulness, which is the definition of personal leadership, but as well as ceremony. So we would go and sit in a sweat lodge or touch it and have to feel the discomforts, right? Our feelings, our thoughts. But then eventually that would be that balance that we needed to kind of like connect with ourselves. And that healing begins, learning to sit still with ourselves. So as a way of learning, again, the culture of wellness, integrating cultural wellness into recovery can be part of a lifestyle, a traditional lifestyle. But think about let's talk about culturally relevant and community or person-centered. What wellness is waiting for you at home? What are some of those factors that will actually have that positive impact? So this is like retraining the brain, right? I think this is sort of creating new pathways. And we can share if you have any questions or thoughts, comments that we can maybe save that for the end of the presentation. But the benefits of self-care and wellness, less stress. And if you notice, the wellness wheel, mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, social, financial, occupational, career, can one of those affect the other? Can financial stress affect our mental health? Or can our physical health, like diabetes, affect our mental health, our behavioral health? Yeah, definitely. So the benefits of self-care and wellness, again, being proactive, sort of engaging in the present, making those choices, really individualizing this. So less stress. So less stress means, right, really less negative impact on our hearts, right, our body, less inflammation, and then holistic balance. So again, the natural sort of versus synthetic, when we're in balance, it feels good when we have sort of this balance in our life, or whether it's emotional, mental, but every day, right, there's always work to be done. Something my grandmother would say, something that you engage in as part of the living and growing. And then benefits of self-care and wellness, personal growth and maturity. I was like, I don't know about this. It seems a little, kind of beyond my years, but you kind of grow from those responsibilities, and as well as personal awareness, that self-reflection. And I think even that self-care has a way of giving us sort of that learned experience and confidence. So more personal growth and maturity. And I said more self-esteem and reliance on ourselves. So integrating cultural wellness into recovery, really just being able to engage in our, again, I mentioned those extra therapeutic factors, but really can make us more reliant self. And then the benefits, of course, is appreciation of self and others, And I think this is an important value when we begin to see ourselves, but also in our families, in our communities. So the benefits of self-care and wellness. So I call this my white corn time. This is my little twin goat. He's about 2 weeks old now. But it was just like I'm protective of him and just really appreciative. But it's a lot of work, to have animals. And those are all part of those roles and responsibilities. Because if I didn't have, I guess feeding life sort of gives you life as well. But I think this sort of integration step might be a helpful idea for you, but also just knowing that, healing and wellness is really making that moment, being in the moment with ourselves and sort of embracing, who we are. So I'll go ahead and open it up. Thoughts and ideas, comments, affirmations, questions, reinforcements, or what stood out for you today? What was new for you today?
So I guess I'll start. What stood out to me was just, a lot of times when I'm taking phone calls or we're working with someone in support groups, they're in a moment of crisis. And so I think a lot of times we focus on the crisis and trying to get resources for people because the crisis is sort of, all of their attention is going to that. So I was wondering if you had any advice on just how to sort of also maybe remind people maybe they need to just get grounded or go outside or do some of that, pull themselves into balance. Because it seems like a lot of times in the mental illness, you kind of go from swings of crisis times and down times. And I guess that just stood out to me of trying to strive for that balance every day, no matter what is going on.
Thank you. And it would seem like when we focus on the crisis, it's like, again, it's the past and the future, but what can we do now, right? And then sort of look at sort of that balanced approach, maybe. That's what I heard.
Mm-hmm.
And that trauma-informed care, I think, is what they call it now. Again, that's a new buzzword, giving somebody a cup of water, right? Or maybe instead of being in the office, maybe sit in the patio, that trauma-informed care. But that's a new thought to an old idea. That's what my grandma would do when you show up at her house. She says, "Are you hungry, son? Grandson, are you hungry? Can I get you some water? Or do you want to lay down and get some rest?" And if you felt better just by having water or maybe her soup.
So you're kind of saying too that like in that moment, the brain maybe needs other things than just not just responding to what the person is thinking at that moment, but maybe if you could add in some of those other factors, the brain would sort of start healing itself in another way, or maybe it brings more balance to, the entire brain. I don't know if that's what you meant by creating the new pathways in the brain.
Exactly. And I think it is a relational approach because that's kind of building the alliance, right? Building the connections, the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we miss that. Sometimes the brain chemistry, we allowed, psycho, pharmaceutical interventions. And they just kind of hijacked it, for a lot of our, we sort of followed along. But I think this is really looking at more of a trauma-informed, again, person-centered approach. And it's just sort of looking at it how the brain can recover. And I think I always go back to my grandparents. I don't know, they call it, or we call it like, seems really simple, like OIT. But yeah, it's just an old Indian trick, just to be outside working the land. You feel good. You release those natural neurotransmitters in the brain.
Mm-hmm. It's really interesting. And I'll open it up to questions from everyone else. I just had one more question. I listened to your interview on the Richard Eads show, and I think he asked you about the COVID pandemic and how like your community dealt with that. And you said that one of the things that you were doing was trying to pay attention to how you tell the story. And I was just wondering what you meant by that, like what you meant by the importance of how you frame things, I guess, to the community, how you tell the story of what's going on. It was a really small comment, but it definitely stuck out.
Yeah, I think the story already told. So storytelling is a very powerful, with like, I would say our database, our ancestral blueprints. That's where resilience is, because it's, just a library of data. So when we talk about like the pandemic, we go back to those stories about resilience and taking care of each other. So we retell those stories, and we, about, helping each other out again. So rather than sort of that fear, just sort of hijacking and just sort of us, kind of, how would you say, like, sort of confining, fear,
Mm-hmm.
and just sort of invoking fear in people was like, okay, we need to sort of continue that, go back to that, I guess, cultural value or understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And that it will pass. So they would say, means even through time and challenges, our values grow stronger.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. So thank you for sharing that. And I guess I'll open it up if anyone has a question. You can put it in the chat, or it's fine to also unmute yourself, and I'll look for raised hands. Looks like everyone's on mute here.
You have a question?
Go ahead.
Thank you again, Lorenzo, for coming and taking your time to speak with us. It's interesting perspective on wellness. I'm just curious about the title of your talk, Integrating Cultural Wellness and Recovery. So I think about culture as customs, arts, social institutions of a particular people. So when you say cultural wellness, are you talking about your specific culture? Or, I mean, because that's a lot of what you're talking about, it's kind of generic, but I just wondered why you called it cultural wellness.
I could have called it cultural values. I could have called it the net values.
So you are speaking specifically about the.
But then I'm using, I think I could have used intercultural wellness. So I do appreciate you defining that, but I think that, I can present it from my perspective and as a shared. I think we're trying to define it in a way to say like the definition of culture means people.
Yeah.
So I think I'm coming from, I mentioned my grandparents. I don't know if you heard that part.
Yeah.
From my grandfather. I use my language, but I also have to, just like anywhere else, integrate these generic thoughts or kind of universal ideas. So
you're saying that, I mean, we all have different cultures, cultural things. And like in my family, being a Hispanic family, we have certain teas, grandmother would give teas or certain herbs or ointments or whatever if somebody was ill. Or so your talk is really more generic, I guess. I mean, though you're using your perspective, but these could be used for any particular culture.
Generic or general?
Yeah, generic.
General.
So with
Sounds like-
generic, I think it means something
Yeah,
else.
Walmart,
General.
great value,
General.
and versus Target, Target.
Yeah.
No, I think it's meant for you, a new thought. If you, again, if you want to talk about strategies, the Center for Disease Control, like tribal practices for wellness with Indian country, that was another grant that we did. So there were specific strategies. So, that would be another presentation or, extensive sort of walkthrough on those strategies on nutrition, how they influence wellness, or what those narratives and how they connect, specifically even with horses, how that relationship wellness is sort of, in how you engage in that. Those are different. But I think this is a conversation about how kind of a conversation, I think, on a new thought to an old idea. And like you said, I asked the question earlier, what wellness, is waiting for us there at home. Could be your home, like you said, your table, what your grandma left for you, that soothes you, that gives you that energy. So I think those are often missed, because we talk about CBT and, you look at the modern approaches to like mental health, behavioral health, going through DBT or MRT. So these factors aren't even a part of those modalities. So hopefully this adds another value.
So I have another kind of follow-on question to that. So how do you integrate your culture of wellness into some of your work, like your substance abuse work, the treatment courts and that?
How do I do that? It's a long conversation, Betty. It's policy, right?
Because you just talked about CBT and some of the other modalities that are.
I had the opportunity to do it, I think, in my clinic, but I think it was because of a lot of reasons. And I think integrative care, that was the model. But I think I'm thinking of other programs where how do you get horses into, the facility, or how do we work that, billing or credentialing. So I think your question is, I'm sort of I think that's where my experience has come in. I mentioned the Forrest Gump experience. So it can be a radical idea in recovery, even as well as radical change for programs, integrating some of these strategies. I know people are terrified just to walk around the block sometimes in programs, but sometimes that's what, might help.
I guess I had a question. What do you think is the risk of not integrating some of these other factors of balance into, like, if let's say you just focus on the clinical aspect of someone, what they're dealing with, like what risk do you run there? Because it seems like on some level you're saying you're more than just a brain like that has a medical problem. So you need to, I'm trying to just think, you need to address people or take care of people in a more holistic way. And I'm just wondering, like what would happen if you didn't? And what happens to, do those parts of yourself get depressed, or do people just get thrown more off balance if they're focusing, too much on, let's say, their illness and not just going outside or having an interaction with an animal?
That's a good question. I don't know about risk. I think, integratedly, for example, when you say retraining the brain, creating new pathways, and then for like Suboxone, we need that, right, to stabilize a patient. So that integrative care value, I think, is kind of what we're beginning to see. Programming sort of more comprehensive approach. So this might just be that introduction, again, on sort of the main themes of what it could look like. I know there's programs that are based all on a medical model. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you are all familiar with that. Like, does that seem effective? Does it almost seem ethical sometimes? Mm-hmm. Right?
I don't know. It's this past weekend, they had this a mental health festival on the plaza, and the LifeLink had organized it. And in this festival, they had dance, and they had, they had a lot of different types of music. And it felt to me like the community was embracing, this mental health community in a new way. And, I can't say, I don't know clinically what it does, but I think we're going from a time where, like, if you were dealing with a mental health issue, it seemed like the only option was to go to a doctor, and there wasn't a huge community. And like with NAMU, we tried to create a safe space where people can meet other people who are dealing with this and talk about it. But now it does seem like the community and the times they're talking about it more, and they're almost just welcoming, people living with these issues into the greater community. And, sometimes music's involved, or dance,
drumming.
They had drums, they had, all sorts of different factors. So to me, I can just say it felt like such a more positive place. And, if you're experiencing these issues, that feeling of aloneness can, be one of the worst parts. So yeah, I do think it is really important to approach it this way. It's just interesting. It is a different model than we really have, I think, right now in a lot of areas. But it does sound like maybe Santa Fe is working on embracing some of these other, ways of healing.
Yeah. That's a great, I think part of even our work, right, is part of it is discovery, like what's new. But you often hear these words like community-based, like which community, like my community, Betty shared like her community and her family, or culturally relevant, like which culture are you talking about? But these are just buzzwords now, just to say, and to say we're doing this, or we say person-centered, right? You hear that now. But I think we're defining that, just sort of looking at it from a dimensional perspective right now. What does that mean?
Mm-hmm. So if you had someone who maybe didn't feel connected to any community, well, I guess, I don't know if it's much of a question, but I'm wondering if adding some of these elements in, like nature, maybe some animal therapy, if that would be a way to welcome them into the community, and it adds more of a welcoming feel all around, rather than just, addressing a clinical issue. And I think that at the NAMI convention one time, they had these doctors who were taking people who are homeless and just creating a home for them to come in. And they said what they did is they interacted with them. They played video games, and they did cooking, and they did a lot of things, not just talking about their illness. And they found that people really healed from that, because when they weren't focusing on their illness, it was like they were able to bring out these other parts of themselves and sort of find a balance. So I'm wondering if you could take those, put them in place, if you could help.
Yeah. I'm working on jail-based cultural wellness program in Socorro County. They have 2 Navajo communities, an Alamo and Rama community. And one of them is these strategies. Again, not looking at what is the recidivism, right? Is like they've been through treatment, they've been medicated, and their thing is that it's not working. So I think there is a value, but I don't like to separate and say, one doesn't work to the other. That's what the value of integration is, right? To say this might work for you and this might work here, but kind of working together, because that's the point. Yeah, like I said, it could be a radical change for programs. And, where at some point, maybe this could be part of the new, approach. Who would have thought?
Yeah, and so we really appreciate you talking to us. I've been wanting to have a conversation like this for years and years, and just see if there are things that we're missing in building a community, and just opening up the I'd like to even have more discussions about how mental illness is viewed in other cultures, because I know some don't really see it as an illness. They see it as more of a spiritual path or something like that. But thank you so much for just speaking with us and being open to questions. And did anyone else have any other questions? Can't see if there's any hands up. Oh, okay. Then I think on that note, I'll just say thank you.
Let me share.
Oh,
Sorry,
sure.
Jessica.
Go ahead. Sorry.
My contact information.
Oh, great.
If you have thoughts here today that, just continue the conversation and sharing, just reach out to me. The Center for Intercultural Care is located here in Tijeras. So we do have some upcoming trainings, immersion, kind of cultural immersion, Native American cultural immersion, land-based learning here at our site. So, and as well as, just basically focusing on wellness, and as well as our clinical substance use, so providing CEUs. So if you want to kind of, it's starting out, so they'll have more information here to share with you all, and take some time maybe to treat yourself out, come over. We'll provide you a meal and some water. Maybe have you lay down, take a nap somewhere in the trees and feel better.
Yeah.
That's great. And if you have a link for that, I'd love to send it out in our newsletter, or just let people know more about how they could get connected with it. So you could email me maybe later.
Oh, Troy has his hand up.
Okay. Oh, sorry, Troy. And I think you'll have to unmute yourself.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
My apologies. I was stuck on mute there. Lorenzo, I really appreciate the information today. My reason I wanted to ask you if you gave these talks to other entities. Like, I work as the Health and Human Services Director for one of the Pueblo tribes up north, and trying to get tribal council to understand these principles is kind of difficult sometimes. And I was just wondering if you would be willing to come to one of our health council meetings or something like that to have a similar talk about these principles, because they're quick to jump to the medical model of inpatient treatment and medication and things like that. And I just trying to get them to understand exactly what you're referring to, that there's a different approach for each individual person based on their experience. So my question is, what is the likelihood of having you come and give a talk like that to the people who are the decision makers and policy makers on the Pueblo?
I think with the local government, the new leadership comes in every year. So you had to kind of continue that conversation, like you were saying, information, keeping people up, you know, like I don't want to say up to date, but informing them, that informed consent, right? As far as best practices, services, or, you know, all of that. We started with Cochiti Pueblo, a wellness program. So that was something that and it was getting tribal leadership approval. So I think there are elements here that can definitely be shared to make it culturally appropriate, to really understand the capacity and what resources are available. And definitely if you need, I'm not sure if you're still there, reach out to me.
Yeah.
I
Looks
think
like he's gone.
Yeah.
But
So
we can send
can
him
connect
your
me, yeah.
information.
That would be okay.
That was Troy. Okay.
We can send him your contact information, Lorenzo.
And then Jacqueline had a good comment in the group chat. She just said, thank you, Lorenzo. Your presentation was both interesting and soothing to the soul. And I agree with that. So are there any more questions? Anybody?
Just thank you very much.
You have another comment. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I have one more before I have to eat dinner, another wellness plan. I have a mentor. His name is Dr. Joseph Gone. So if you want to get into a little bit more insights on Joe Gone. I like his research. I like some of his sort of understanding. And he talked about evidence-based practices, right? Even in mental health in our communities, specifically our own tribal communities, these medical models that come into our communities. And I'm talking about my children, I'm talking about my elders. And I like his saying is evidence-based practice. That's kind of our driving force, right? That's sort of our truth. And he would say, it's the same school of thought the missionaries drove in. Do this and that's going to help you. And he says, now we're shifting and looking at our community, what we know helps us, what makes us healthy and balanced. And that's that practice-based evidence. So I'm going to reference Dr. Joseph Gone and read some of his, literature, teaches at Harvard, Grovot, Dakota tribe, but he's, kind of helped me get through that perspective and understand why I'm sharing this. I'm speaking from the land. That's our evidence. So I'm speaking from our elders. That's what's working. That's what works for us. So I guess if we look at evidence-based, I remember opioids were the cure-all. I was doing this opioid prevention training for the Native American Training Institute series. And we found videos of commercials, in the late 90s, early 2000s on how opioids are going to help, they're like awesome, cure for pain. And look at the pandemic now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting perspective, even in how we approach, the construct validity of treatment and therapy and the science of it. So thank you for having me on, and appreciate Tom as well for, getting this connection, Dr. Fitzgerald as well, how we sort of made that connection.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.